Are you all able to hear my voice?
Yes, madam.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Right. So, there are three topics that we are going to discuss in today's class. One is perception, the second one is attitude, and the third one is learning. Okay. So, let us first try to understand what perception is. Okay. Um, so, perception, see, okay, before trying to understand what is perception, let us try to understand what is stimuli. Because stimuli is at the core of perception. So, what is stimuli? Stimuli is any raw data or information that individuals encounter in their environment. Right? I repeat once again, any raw data or any information that individuals encounter in their daily life is known as stimuli. So, any verbal communication that you come across, any written messages, any visual cues, any other sensory inputs, all those constitute stimuli. So, stimuli could be objects, stimuli could be events, stimuli could be people also. Right? All these are stimuli. Okay. So now that you've understood what stimuli is, let us try to understand what is perception. So, perception is the process in which you receive the stimuli, you select it, you organize it, and interpret it so as to assign some meaning to it. Right? So, perception is the process of understanding and interpreting the environment that is around us. Right? So, this is a process by which people organize and interpret their sensory impression in order to give meaning to their environment. So, for example, I hear a sound, okay? I hear a loud sound. So, I'm receiving a sound, then I select it. That means, should I pay attention to this or not? Take, for example, I pay attention to this. Then what do? I hear a loud sound, I pay attention to it, then I try to interpret it. Then I try to organize it. Right? That is the process of perception. Right? That is the process of perception. Perception is where we are trying to understand the world around us, where we are trying to understand the various sounds, the various stimuli, the various verbal, non-verbal messages that we get from the environment around us. That is perception. Now, uh, another important thing about perception that you need to understand is that perception is a subjective process. Subjective process means it changes from individuals to individuals. It changes from one individual to another individual. That is, when I hear a loud sound, I may interpret it as, okay, somebody fell down. That is because that sound came. X may interpret as maybe a tree fell down. Y may interpret it as maybe one car hit another car. So each one of us are interpreting that sound in different manner. Therefore, perception is a subjective process. Different individuals perceive their environment in different ways. And one more important thing about perception that you should understand is perception always true? No. Perception need not necessarily be true. For example, I form an opinion about there is one person, X. I say that X is a very good person. My friend says, no, X is a very bad person. So my perception about X is that X is a good person. My friend's perception about X is that X is a bad person. Right? Now, what does it mean? Both of us are perceiving about X differently, but only one of us can be right. Either I am right or my friend is right. X cannot be good and bad at the same time. See, people go and watch a movie. Some people like the movie very much. Some people don't like it. Some people find it very interesting. Some people find it boring. Right? So, because perception changes from person to person, it need not necessarily be true. It need not necessarily be factual. But in spite of that, Why are you studying perception? When I am myself telling you that perception is not necessarily true, not necessarily factual, it could be wrong most of the times, but still I am teaching you about perception. Why should you know about perception? Okay. So the point here is, though perception is not factual, though perception could be wrong many times, human behavior is based on perception. Whatever is my perception about X, my behavior towards X would depend on that. Whatever is your perception about X, your behavior towards X would depend upon that. So, why is perception important? Though perception is not factual, perception is important because human behavior depends upon perception. Right? So, take for example, I say that eating fruits is good for health. That is my perception. I will eat lot of fruits. Your perception is eating fruits is not good for health. You should not eat fruits. You should only eat vegetables. That is your perception. So what would you do? You would not eat fruits. You would eat vegetables. So what is happening here? Our behavior is dependent on our perception. That is why perception is important, right? Now, uh, uh, though uh, though here when I'm talking about perception, perception seems to be like some scientific process. But the thing is, perception is something that we encounter every day without even realizing it, right? So every day you hear something, you try to understand it. Every day you see something, right? You try to interpret and understand it. Every day you see some event happening. See, you're going on a road. You see that, there's one cycle, there's a person driving a cycle, and there is a big car. Both of them are standing and fighting with one another, right? The moment we see that, what do we think? Maybe this car driver must have hit that poor bicycle rider, right? This is perception. Maybe you don't know that it is called perception, but that is perception. All the time we keep interpreting things that are happening around us, right? Next thing that we need to understand is we need to understand the process of perception. How does perception actually happen? Though I just now told you, I'm on a road. I saw a big car and a bicycle rider arguing in the middle of the road. The moment I see that, I'll say this car driver must have driven very rashly. It must have all happened in seconds, or sometimes maybe in a fraction of a second also. But there are steps in the perceptual process. Perception just doesn't happen like that. There are a series of 4 steps that you need to understand. What are those 4 steps? Receiving, selecting, organizing, interpreting. Okay? Receiving, selecting, organizing, and interpreting. Now let us try to understand what is receiving. Receiving is where we are receiving the stimuli around us, where we are seeing something, where we are hearing something, where we are feeling something, right? All these are the stimuli, and receiving is the process of receiving all these stimuli. So when do we not receive? When we shut our sensory organs. So take for example, if I close my eyes, right? If I close my eyes, I wouldn't see what is happening around me. If I close my ears, if I put my, earphones or earpods or whatever it is into my ears, and I'm listening to some music, right? So I don't hear what is happening around me. So I told you, we hear a loud sound. I will think that it is a tree which fell down. He will think that it is a vehicle which hit another vehicle. But all this will happen only when our ears are open. Take for example, I have earpods in my ear. Uh, does this process of perception happen? It does not happen. So receiving is the first step in the process of perception. Next thing is selecting. Now this is interesting. See, many things happen in our environment simultaneously. Now take for example, you are all attending this online class, right? There must be so many things that must be happening around you. Take for example, your family members must be in some serious discussion, or your family members must be watching some program on the TV, right? Or your family members must be laughing at a joke, right? So simultaneously, you are hearing this class, you are hearing my class, you are hearing your family members talk to one another, you are hearing what the vegetable vendors are selling outside on the road. But do you pay equal attention to all of these sounds? No, human mind cannot do that. So what human mind does is human mind only selects certain things. So take for example, if you feel that this class is more important for you, even though you're sitting in a room where everybody else, all your family members are talking, you will not pay attention to them, right? So what are you doing? You are selecting you're selecting my voice over all the other voices or noises that you're hearing at your home. Or take, for example, you feel that, there is some very important discussion happening between your family members. So if you feel that is more important, then what would you do? Though you can hear my sound, you don't pay attention to what I'm telling. You ignore this and you pay attention to what your family members are talking, right? So that is known as perceptual selectivity. That means we select certain stimuli, we ignore others, right? Now, uh, what are those stimuli that we select? What are those stimuli that we ignore? There are certain factors that influence this process of selecting stimuli from the environment, right? Let us look at the external factors. What are those external factors which influence the process of perception, right? Size. The first factor is size. Bigger the size, greater are the chances of that particular object catching the attention of an individual. Bigger the size, okay? So that means when see, when compared to a small newspaper advertisement and a full page newspaper advertisement, which catches our attention fast? The full page newspaper advertisement catches our attention first. So whenever an object is bigger in size, it tends to catch our attention, right? The next one is intensity. See, bright colors, loud noise, okay, bright lights, strong odors, they catch our attention faster than light colors, dim lights, soft music. They don't catch our attention fast. So take for example, in the example that I told you, I am taking a class here and your family members are talking something. So take for example, suddenly while talking they increase their voice and they start talking in a very loud voice. So what do? Automatically your attention shifts from my voice to their voices. Right? Similarly, you are standing on a road. There are a lot of people walking, but there is one person who wears a bright red colored dress. Immediately, that person catches your attention. Right? So these are the external factors which affect uh, the process of perceptual selectivity. Repetition. Now, anything that is repeated again and again, that tends to attract our attention. See, when we watch cricket matches on TV, you all must be experiencing this. The same advertisement is repeated 100 times or I don't know how many times. Why do they do that? See, I'm sure you all know whenever, for once they play a TV ad, that company has to pay money. And if they're playing it 100 times, they have to pay money to 100 times. So we feel, why are they playing the same ad again and again? Are they foolish to do that? To waste their money? No. They know this concept of perceptual selectivity. They know that anything that is being repeatedly told, anything that is being repeatedly conveyed to the other person tends to be remembered better. Right? So that is the concept of repetition. Next one is contrast. See, this is also a very interesting principle. Now, this principle says whichever stimuli, okay, stands out against the background or the objects, that stimuli tends to get more attention, right? That means It should be different from the background. Anything that is different from the background tends to attract our attention, right? See, take for example a danger sign. A danger sign usually has a skull and two crossbones. You don't see it everywhere. You only see it at one point, at those places where it is dangerous to go, right? So the moment you see it, you are like, you suddenly become alarmed, right? The next one is movement. Now, this principle states that moving objects, moving things tends to catch our attention faster. So there are a lot of vehicles parked, and there is one vehicle that is moving. Which vehicle will we pay attention to? We will pay attention to the vehicle that is moving, right? The next one is novelty and familiarity. See, novelty means new. Objects which are completely new or familiarity. Objects which are very familiar to us, they gain more attention. So, for example, you told your friend that I will meet you at a movie theater or an exhibition or somewhere where it is crowded. There are a lot of people in that, but out of those 100 people there standing, you still can make out your friend. The moment you see your friend's face, you will be able to identify. Why? Because of familiarity. Your friend's face is more familiar when compared to all the strangers there. Right? Similarly, take for example, you go to a family gathering, all your family, your family members are meeting somewhere, 20, 30 people are there. There is one person, stranger, who you have not seen earlier. So, in all that familiar faces, whichever face is new, you are seeing for the first time, that will catch your attention sooner. So, that is known as novelty and familiarity. Anything that is different or anything that is familiar will catch our attention when compared to the rest of the background. Right? Next, the nature refers to whether the object is visual in nature or auditory. That means whether it is a sound or an image. Right? Whether it is sound or image. And it is a common fact that images catch our attention better than words. Right? I just now gave you an example where, wherever you have transformers and all, where you're not supposed to go, they put a picture of a skull and two crossbones. They don't say, don't touch this, because people give more seriousness to that skull and crossbones rather than to the word, do not touch here or do not come here. Okay? Similarly, moving pictures, or in other words, videos, when compared to the image or picture, videos attract more attention, right? And again, when compared to normal narration, a rhyming phrase catches more attention, right? So these are all the nature of the object, whether it is a sound, it is an image, it is a moving image, or it is a video. All those things are to be considered, right? These were all external factors. That means these were all factors in the environment around us. There are also some factors within us, okay, which will affect the process of perception. These factors are known as internal factors. These factors are known as internal factors. What is the first factor? The first internal factor is learning, right? So what does it mean? The way you interpret the world around you depends on what learning you have in the past. So learning creates expectancy in the individuals. Learning creates expectancy in the individuals, and then they tend to perceive what they want to perceive, right? So take for example, you went to a restaurant, a particular chain of restaurants, and the food was not good there. Now, next time, whenever somebody says we'll go to that restaurant, what could you say? No, no, that the food in that restaurant is not good. Why are you saying that? Because of past experiences, because you have learned that earlier you went there, you ate food, and the food was not good. So now you know that this restaurant or this particular, branch of restaurant, the food is never good, right? So that is about learning. It's an internal factor. Next one is needs. People have different needs. Somebody could be thirsty, somebody could be hungry. A person could be having a need for achievement, need for success, need for affiliation. People might have different needs. These various needs also play a significant role in the process of perceptual selectivity. That means these needs determine what we perceive and what we ignore. So, take for example, when you are thirsty, when you are very thirsty, right? Places selling water or places where water is available, you pay more attention to that, right? Similarly, when you're very hungry, right, you will pay more attention to all the eating places. Wherever food is available, you will only see food everywhere, right? Similarly, person who has a high need for achievement, who wants to succeed, what that person will do? That person will tend to work hard even in the leisure time also, right? The next one is age. So learning was one internal factor that affected perceptual selectivity. Needs is another internal factor that affects perceptual selectivity. And the third one is age, right? So people of different age groups, they have different perceptions about the environment. So you all know this. This is what we call as generation gap, right? So your parents think differently when compared to you. Your grandparents think differently when compared to your parents. Or if you have children, your children must be thinking differently when compared to you, right? So different people have different, because of their age, have different way of perceiving or interpreting things around their interest. So perception is also very strongly influenced by the interest of the person subconsciously. So take for example a person who's interested in painting. Wherever that person goes, that person only notices nice paintings, color combinations, patterns, and things like that, right? Um, Even wherever they go to, take for example, they go to a movie also, they're watching a movie also, they'll pay attention to all the nice portraits, the nice drawings and the paintings that are there in the movie. Take for example, there is another person who's very who likes fashion, clothes. So they'll pay more attention to the kind of clothes that were worn by the various actors in the movie, right? See this picture, I hope you all can see on the screen. This is an optical illusion, right? So some people say that this is a picture of an old woman. Some people say that this is a picture of a young woman, right? Now, the process of perception explains to us. Now, some people are saying that this is a picture of an old woman. Some people are saying that this is a picture of a young woman. Why? Why are they perceiving it differently? Right. So the concept says that people who are see, there are different interpretations. There's one interpretation which says young people who are young, say that this is a picture of a young woman, and people who are old say that this is a picture of an old woman. Right? That is one interpretation. Another interpretation says, see, you first show a picture of a young woman and then you show this. Most of them would say that this is a young woman. Then you show a picture of an old woman to another set of people and then show this picture to them. Then they all would say this is an old woman. So this is what exactly learning is all about. Whatever you've seen earlier, whatever you've experienced earlier, that will determine how you perceive things now. Okay. So, like I told you, there are 4 steps in the process of perception: receiving, selecting, organizing, and interpreting. So, we've already understood about receiving, we've already understood about selecting. Now, the third one is organizing, right? So, what people do is whatever data or stimuli they get from the external environment, they organize it. They organize it in a particular manner so that there is some meaning attached to it, right? So how we organize it depends on some principles. The first one is the figure and the ground principle. Figure and ground principle. See, to explain this, I will show you this picture. See, if you look at this picture and if you show this picture to somebody and ask them what is it, right? So some people might say, this is a picture which has two black faces in it, two people facing one another, two black faces, right? Some others might say, this is a picture of a white flower vase, right? What is the difference? Why is it that different people are interpreting it differently? See, when a person who says that there are two black faces in it, that person is focusing on the black part. And the person who said that this is a white flower vase, that person is focusing on the white part. So whatever we focus becomes the figure, and whatever we ignore or neglect, that becomes the ground, right? That becomes the ground. That is the principle of figure and ground, right? The next one is perceptual grouping. What do you mean by perceptual grouping? See, what people tend to do is people tend to group the stimuli into patterns and then form opinions about them uh, based on their own perceptions, right? So, the principle of similarity, proximity, closure, and continuity. The principle of similarity says that whichever objects are similar in say, shape, size, or color, we tend to perceive them to be alike, same, similar, right? See, take for example, there is one student in the um, class, right? He 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 wears a particular type of dress or he dresses in a particular manner. And take for example, he's not a good student. He's not a sincere student, a very problematic student. If anybody else who dresses like that, the teachers will think that they are all like they are all similar to one another, which might not be true, right? So that is the concept of similarity. Proximity tends to refers to closeness, geographical proximity, closeness. So whichever stimuli are close by, we tend to perceive that they are all alike. So usually teachers think that all students who are sitting in the back bench are alike because they're all together, right? The principle of closure. What does the principle of closure say? The principle of closure says that if even some parts are missing, we tend to fill those parts. We and then this and then perceive as if it is complete, right? Then the principle of continuity. What is this principle of continuity? This principle of continuity, what it tends to perceive that there are continuous lines or continuous patterns even when there might not be anything like that, right? See, proximity. So if you ask people, are there horizontal lines here or are there vertical lines here? Most of the people would say that there are vertical lines here. Why are they treating vertical lines and why are they not taking it as horizontal lines? Because the distance between dots in the vertical line are closer. So we treat it as this similarity, right? In this case, what people would say, are there horizontal lines here or vertical lines here? People would say that there are horizontal lines. They wouldn't say that there are vertical lines. Why? Because objects in the horizontal line are similar to one another, right? Continuity here, right? So people think that it is there is one curved line here and there is one straight line here, right? But this might not be the truth, right? They could be two curves like that you see in the last column. This is the principle of closure. So if you ask somebody, with what does this diagram represent? All of them say this diagram represents a circle. There are gaps in it. It cannot be a circle. Circle is, it should be closed. But still people say that this is a circle. Why? Because what they are doing? They are closing the missing gaps. The next one is perceptual constancy. Perceptual constancy. What does it mean? See, this principle says that there is a tendency among people to perceive certain characteristics of an object as remaining constant, right? Despite of all the variations in the stimuli. So there could be variations. Sometimes the stimuli could be small, big, bright, light, or whatever it is. But still, people perceive it constantly. Now, this principle, why does it happen like this? Why do people do that? Because it provides a sense of stability in this world. It provides a sense of stability. Now, this concept of perceptual constancy, there are a lot of aspects in it. The shape constancy, size constancy, color constancy, and perceptual defense. So, so first, let us try to see what is shape constancy. That means when an object appears to maintain its shape despite of some changes, right? So anything that is round, close to round, we say it is round. We don't say it is slightly distorted. We just think that it is round. Similarly, the size of an object, we tend to perceive it as same, even if we move far away from it, or even if we are nearer to it. So, for example, a player who's playing football, when he moves away from the ball, he will not perceive it as small, and when he comes close to the ball, he will not perceive it as large. He will perceive it as of the same size. Similarly, color also. Take for example, you have a red car, even if it is in bright sunlight or it is in a very evening dim light, you will still look at it as red. Just because there is change in light, for you the color will not change. Right? The next one is defense, perceptual defense. What does this principle say? This principle says that people tend to build a defense against the stimuli which are conflicting, threatening, and unacceptable. Right? So whichever stimuli is not acceptable to us, we deny it. We say no, that is wrong. It is not possible, or we try to modify that data, or we try to change, bring about a change in the perception. So whatever we strongly believe in, if there is some stimuli which tells us that no, this is not true, then we try to deny it. So take for example, all my life I thought that milk is good for health. But now today somebody tells me, no, milk is not good for health. I will deny it. I say, no, what you're saying is wrong. Maybe that person could be a doctor also. I say, no, that doctor is wrong. That doctor doesn't know. Or maybe, or what I'll try to do, I'll try to bring about a change in the data. Maybe the doctor said drinking too much of milk is not good, but drinking one glass of milk is good. So I am trying to modify the data myself. And the last one is interpretation, right? So receiving, selecting, organizing, and finally interpretation of the data, right? So, see, I told you when we were in the first slide itself, I told you, is perception always right? Is perception always factual? No, it is not. Perception is not always right. Perception is not always factual. But uh, why are we still studying it? Yeah, because it has an impact on our human behavior. Why is perception not always right? Why are there sometimes errors in our perceptual process? Now, these points will explain to us. Perceptual set. What does it mean? Perceptual set refers to previously held beliefs or experiences about an object, right? That is what is called as a perceptual set, right? Take for example, I have a particular opinion about a particular shop product or a particular brand. Those are very strongly affixed in my mind. For example, Apple iPhones are the best in the world, right? Dell laptops are the best in the world. Even if something happens later also, I will not move from this. Take for example, I bought a Dell laptop and it got spoiled on the same day, but I don't blame the company. I'll say, this must have happened, that must have happened, I must have not used it properly. This is because I want to hold on to the belief or the experiences that I have earlier. That is known as perceptual set. The next one is stereotyping. Now, stereotyping is very wrong. Lot of problems in our world today are because of the fact that we stereotype people around us. So, what is stereotyping? Stereotyping is the tendency of judging someone on the basis of the group to which he or she belongs, right? So, you are forming an opinion about a person not based on that person, but based on the group to which that person belongs, right? See, you must have, heard this, like, array, all North Indians are like this, all South Indians are like this, all Malayalis are like this, or all Punjabis are like this, or, people from Telangana are like this, people from Andhra. People pass opinions about others. People pass judgments about others based on the group. So, see, for example, I say all Malayalis are like this. Did I ever interact with each and every Malayali in this world? Then why am I passing a judgment on all of them? Because I must have come across one Malayali, two Malayalis, or three Malayalis. Whatever opinion I must have formed about them, I am attributing it to the entire world. So that is an error. That is known as stereotyping. Right? The next one is halo effect. Now, stereotyping is an error. Halo effect is also an error. 1 second. Okay. Halo effect. What is halo effect? Halo effect is a tendency of perceiving others on the basis of just one single quality or trait. Okay. So, we are saying a person is good based on just one quality of that person. So take for example, you had an appointment with the doctor. You went to the doctor, but you come out and tell me, I didn't like the doctor. So I asked you, why didn't you like the doctor? So you say he was very badly dressed. He was very, very shabbily dressed. He was not at all neat and clean and professional. I didn't like him. See, what are you doing here? You're judging a doctor, ability of a doctor, based on just one thing. What is that one thing? Based on that person's appearance, right? And sometimes, in an interview, candidates who speak very good English tend to get selected more than candidate who has better job knowledge or subject knowledge, right? So what are the interviewers doing here? They are going only by that one trait. Okay, very good communication skills. Is able to speak in English really well. Okay, so she is a good candidate or he is a good candidate. What are we doing here? Based on just one quality or one trait, we are forming an overall opinion about that person. This is known as halo effect. Projection. Now, projection is the tendency of assigning our attributes to others. So, take for example, if I am a lazy manager, I am a manager and I am very lazy. I will say that everybody else around, all the team members are lazy. Or if I am a very punctual person, I will assume that all the others are punctual, right? Right? The next one is selective perception. We have already discussed this. Do we perceive everything around us? No, we don't perceive everything around us. We only perceive bits and pieces. So, take for example, Uh, if you are a fan of Narendra Modi, right? So whatever news you get, you will only pay attention. If you are a fan of Narendra Modi, you will only pay attention to those news that are supporting him. Any news that you see which don't support him, you will tend to ignore that. You will say, no, no, that you will not even pay attention to it. Similarly, if you don't like Narendra Modi, take for example, you're not a fan of him, you hate him. So all the negative news about him, you will pay attention to it. And all any good news, if you are listening about him, you will not pay attention to it. That is selective perception. Right? So finally, what are those factors that affect the process of perception? Right? Three aspects. Perceiver, that means the person who is forming an opinion. Perceived is that object or event or person that you're forming an opinion about. So I just now gave you an example. You are forming an opinion about Narendra Modi. So you are a perceiver. Narendra Modi is the perceived. Right? And the third one is situation. What is the kind of setting in which you are in? The physical setting, the social setting, or the organizational setting. Which kind of a setting or a situation you are in? All right. So all these factors affect perception. Your habits, your past experiences, your personality, your values, all these things will have an impact on the process of perception. Similarly, the physical attributes of the object, the appearance, all these things will also affect the perception process. Right? So, like I told you, today's class we're going to discuss about three topics: perception, attitudes, and learning. We have completed our discussion on perception. Now let us try to understand what attitudes are, right? So what is attitude? Attitude is a psychological attribute that has an impact on our human behavior, right? So what exactly are attitudes? Attitudes are evaluative statements. They are evaluative statements that we make to describe people, to describe events, to describe objects, right? So these statements could be favorable or unfavorable. You say, I like this pen. I don't like working here. I don't like eating this. I don't like this person. So what are these are all statements which are evaluating somebody or something. And these, when you are saying, I like this pen, that means you are expressing your favorable attitude towards the pen. If you are saying, I don't like that person, that means you are expressing your unfavorable attitude towards that person. Right? So, what exactly are there in attitudes? Beliefs, feelings, action tendencies about one person towards another person or towards some ideas or objects. All these constitute attitudes. Right? Now, uh, whatever people think or feel or the way they intend to act about something, that is known as attitude, right? So attitude represents our beliefs, feelings, and action tendencies, right? Let us look at some characteristics of attitudes. So just now I told you, attitudes are evaluating statements. They are either favorable or unfavorable. When you say, I like the food in this restaurant, that is a favorable attitude. I don't like working with this person. That is an unfavorable attitude. So, what exactly are attitudes? Attitudes are either feelings or beliefs of people about a group or another person. And attitudes are always directed towards something. It could be an object, it could be a person, it could be an event, it could be an idea. Right? So somebody might say, I don't like the idea of secularism. I don't like, or somebody might say, I don't like the idea of communalism. So we don't like ideas. We don't like events. I don't like what happened there. Right? So our attitudes are always about people or ideas or events or objects. Now, see, one thing that you need, perception. Why did we study perception? We studied perception because perception has an impact on human behavior. Similarly, attitudes also result in behavioral actions on part of the person. Right? And one more characteristic about attitude is attitudes cannot be observed directly. And sometimes a person having that attitude also might not know that this is my attitude. Like, for example, sometimes we openly say, I don't like this person. But sometimes we ourselves don't explicitly know that. We ourselves don't state it, right? But it can be noticed. It can be indirectly noticed by noticing the behavior of that person. So, attitude is basically a psychological phenomenon which has to be observed indirectly, right? And again, another important characteristic of attitude is attitude is learned or attitude is acquired over a period of time. You know, at the time of birth, we are not born with attitudes. Over a period of time, we acquire these attitudes, right? And once these attitudes are formed, they are enduring, they are long lasting. It is very difficult to change our attitude. And who holds attitudes? Every person, young, old, rich, poor, busy, uh, not so busy. Every person has attitudes about people or events or things around them. Right. The next thing is components of attitude. See, attitude has got three different components: cognitive component, emotional component, and behavioral component. So what exactly is cognitive component? Cognitive component is a description of beliefs and ideas about other persons, objects, or events. Right? Cognitive. So, what this component does is that this component describes the information that an individual has towards others. What information you have about others, whether this information might or might not be wrong. Correct. See, for example, you know, you want to join an organization. So you collect information about the organization. So you ask X, Y, Z, you ask three people. All three of them said that it is a great place to work. Okay. Now, this information may or may not be correct, right? X, Y, and Z might not have given you the correct picture. But still, you will use this information to develop your feelings towards that organization. So if X, Y, and Z say it is a very good company, you will develop a favorable attitude towards that company. If X, Y, and Z say this is not a good company, you will develop an unfavorable attitude towards that particular company. The next one is affective or emotional component. Now, this affective or emotional component, what it does is it reflects the emotions or feelings of an individual. Emotions or feelings. See, cognitive component was about information. Affective component is about emotions or feelings, right? So, uh, these emotions could be positive or negative, like I like this job, I like this organization. So, your emotions, your feelings. Behavioral component, as the name suggests, it includes the behavioral tendencies, your intention to act in a particular manner, right? So I'm going to join this job. I'm going to, be a part of this organization. That is the behavioral component. But why do people develop attitudes? What is the reason behind it? And like I told you, when we were discussing characteristics of attitude, people not only develop attitudes, but they hold it very strongly. They don't want to change it also. Why is it like that? This is because attitude helps us to respond towards an individual or an object in a meaningful way. So if we specifically look at what are the various functions of attitudes, the first one is the utilitarian function, right? See, sometimes what does this utilitarian function tell us? This function tells us that, um, sometimes we develop attitudes because this attitude will help us. Okay, this attitude will help us. This attitude might help us in getting some positive rewards, or this attitude might help us in avoiding punishments, right? So that so for example, in a factory, that is a worker, if that worker expresses positive attitude towards the employer management, then all the other colleagues might neglect him. But if he expresses negative attitude towards the management, then all his colleagues will accept him as a part of his group. So he finds that having a negative attitude towards the management is beneficial for him, and thus he develops that attitude. Right? That is the utilitarian function. The next one is the ego defensive function. What is this ego defensive function? See, people generally uh, develop some types of attitudes because these attitudes help them to maintain their self-image, defend their self-image. So, for example, if there are workers in an organization, they must be feeling when the new workers are appointed. So they may feel threatened. These people might take over our work. They might be better than us. They might be getting promotion faster than us. Such kind of, feelings they might be having. So what happens? These workers, they develop prejudices against those new workers, negative opinions about the new workers, that these new workers are not qualified, they are less experienced, they don't like us, they are here to take away our jobs, right? So this attitude will continue, it will never be changed unless and until that negative feeling about that new joined workers will change, right? The next one is value expressive function, right? See, our attitudes also reflect our value system, right? That means whichever values are closely related to our self-concept, right? Such attitudes express our values. So take, for example, there is a person who strongly believes in human equality, right? So that person will have a very positive attitude towards participative style of management, towards decentralized decision making, because these things are confirming his value, that value of human equality, equality of everyone, right? The next one is knowledge function. See, attitudes sometimes serve as substitutes for knowledge. Whenever we have to take decision about something, we need to have all the relevant information. But when we don't have the relevant information, in the absence of relevant information, these attitudes, they help us in organizing and drawing inference from the perceived object. So, though it is not right, see, decisions should always be based on information. But what people resort to is people resort to shortcuts. They don't have all the information. They don't have time to collect all the information. So they depend on their attitudes, right? So stereotyping, we just now discussed, forming an opinion about a person based on the group to which that person belongs. Stereotyping is a perfect example of this. Right. Now, when we're talking about attitudes, a person could have hundreds and thousands of attitudes in his life. But as students of organizational behavior, are all these attitudes important to you? No. All these attitudes are not important to you. Which attitudes are important to you? Only work-related attitudes, right? Only work-related attitudes are important for you. So, what are some of work-related attitudes? Job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is the most important work-related attitudes, right? So, what is job satisfaction? Job satisfaction is a general feeling of liking or disliking of an employee towards his job, right? So a person who's highly satisfied from his job, that person will express a positive attitude towards the job. And a person who is dissatisfied, that person will express a negative attitude towards his job, right? And usually, when a person is highly satisfied from his job, he tends to be regular, he tends to be, punctual, he tends to perform well. That is the first work related attitude. Coming to the second work related attitude. What is the second work related attitude? Job involvement, right? So, what is job involvement? Job involvement is the degree to which an individual psychologically identifies himself with his or her job, right? So that means when people are psychologically identifying themselves with the job, when people are giving a lot of importance to their performance at job, that is known as job involvement. So take for example, I could be a teacher, but even if I teach well or I don't teach well, that does not have any impact on me. That means I have no job involvement. Whereas, take for example, if I teach well in the class, I derive a lot of satisfaction out of it. Then it means that I have a lot of job involvement, right? So employees with high level of job involvement, what they do is they identify themselves with their jobs very strongly, and they're very, very particular about their performance. Now, this high level of involvement, it leads to less absenteeism. Absenteeism means employees absenting themselves from work without any valid reason. So, where job involvement is high, absenteeism rate could be low, right? So that is the second work related attitude, job involvement. One second. Yes. So job satisfaction is one attitude, job involvement is another work related attitude. The next one is organizational commitment. What is organizational commitment? Organizational commitment is the extent to which an employee identifies with the organization, the extent to which an employee identifies himself with the goals and objectives of the organization, and the extent to which the employee wishes to be a part of the organization. That is known as organizational commitment. So, how is it different? We just now talked about job involvement. How is it different from job involvement? Job involvement refers to identification with one's job, whereas organizational commitment refers to identification with one's organization and one's goals of that organization. Okay. The next one is perceived organizational support. So, perceived organizational support is the extent to which employees feel that they are important for their organization, the extent to which they feel that their organization cares for their well-being, the extent to which they feel that the organization is fair, equitable, right, uh, and democratic, right? So employees who feel that their organization is very, very supportive, it cares for their well-being, it will reward them without any favoritism or partiality and things like that, then it is known as perceived organizational support, right? So wherever you see that individuals have a strong perception of organizational support, they tend to be strongly motivated to perform for the organization. And the next and the last work related attitude that we're going to discuss is employee engagement, right? So what is employee engagement? Employee engagement, it refers to the employee's level of involvement, satisfaction, and interest for the job that he or she is performing, right? So employees who are highly engaged, they have a strong connection with their work. Whereas disengaged employees, they just, put in minimum effort. They invest their time in the organization, but not energy. For example, people who have low engagement levels, they might be coming to office on time and staying there for 8 hours or whatever is the required time, but they don't put in the required interest. So they just very mechanically, very robotically work. Okay, I have to complete this work. If I don't do this, I will be a memo will be given to me. That's it. So I will work only to make sure that I am not punished. That's it. Beyond that, I don't do. So when people go over and above that, then what is required, the minimum required thing, that is known as employee engagement. Right? The next point that we need to discuss is what are the characteristics of attitudes. Right? So attitudes have an object. Object means there is always a focal point. Right? It could be some concept, right? Or it could be some object, right? So concept means, take for example, mm, reservation. For example, caste-based reservations. Is it correct or not? Should it be there or not? What is our attitude? So attitudes could always have an object. There is always a focal point for all our attitudes. It could be some concept. It could be some object, right? Something, particular thing, for example, right? Um, uh, um, it could sometimes be a social group also, collection of items, right? So that is the first one. Attitudes have an object. Next one is attitudes have direction, degree, and intensity. So when we say attitudes have a direction, it means it could either be favorable or unfavorable. Degree is the extent, whether he likes it or dislikes it, to what extent. And intensity is what is that level of confidence or sureness about the object, or how strongly a person feels about his or her belief or his or her attitude. That is known as intensity. The next characteristic of attitude is attitudes have structures, right? So attitudes display organization. That means, they have internal consistency, and they also possess interattitudinal centrality. So they also tend to be stable, right? Um, and that can be generalized, right? And the next one is attitudes are learned. So like I told you, people are not born with attitudes. Over a period of time, they learn, they acquire these attitudes, right? So the next topic that we're going to discuss is what is the process of formation of attitudes. So I told you people are not born with attitudes. Over a period of time, they develop these attitudes. These attitudes are formed in them. How? How are these attitudes formed in people? Right? So first one is direct experience. So a person has an attitude and he is rewarded for that. He will continue. He will develop that. A person starts having an attitude and he is punished for that. He will shun that attitude or he will give up that attitude. So that is the direct experience part. The next one is classical conditioning, right? So, what people do is they develop an association between the various objects and the emotional reactions that are accompanying them. And that over a period of time would help them in forming the attitude. Right? The next one is operant conditioning. See, attitudes which are reinforced, okay? Attitudes which are reinforced either verbally or non-verbally, they tend to be maintained. Similarly, if a person says that, a particular attitude was ridiculed by others, what that person might do is that person might modify that attitude or completely abandon that attitude also. The next one is vicarious learning. So sometimes what happens, people learn something through observing others. And the person by himself does not have any direct experience. But uh, seeing others, that person has developed that attitude, right? So that is known as vicarious learning, right? Now, in social learning, what happens? Family, peer, groups, and culture, all of them shape an individual's attitude in an indirect manner, right? So we learn from people around us. So this learner must focus the attention on the model. Um, Whatever is observed in the model. Model is whoever is the person. It could be, your parents could be your models, your friends, your cousins, your siblings. Some very successful person could be your model. Whatever you are acquiring from them, they are also becoming a part of your attitude, right? So social learning could take place through your family, through your peer groups, through your role models, all these different things. Social learning can take place. Right? One second. Yeah. The next one is learning. Okay. Learning. What is learning? Learning is defined as a permanent change in behavior. Learning is defined as a permanent change in behavior. And this change in behavior could be because of direct or indirect experience, right? It could be due to education, it could be due to training, it could be due to practice, anything. Whenever there is change in behavior, that is known as learning, right? And this change should be permanent in nature. If there is some change in behavior only for a small period of time, then that cannot be called as learning, right? And another important thing is learning is always reflected through behavior. Learning is reflected through behavior. Okay, so what are the characteristics of learning? First one is learning is a purposeful activity. That means every person who learns does it with a particular goal, does it with a particular objective. So every student, is a unique individual. And this, whatever past experiences this particular student had, those past experiences, they affect the readiness to learn, they affect the understanding of the requirements involved, right? And that is the first thing. Learning is purposeful. The next one is learning is a result of experience. That means, see, though we say, teachers should teach like this, you should have good teachers, you should have, you should send children to good schools and good colleges and things like that. Ultimately, learning is an individual process. Right? Learning is an individual's process. No teacher, no school, no college can do for a student what the student can do for him or herself. Right? So the student should learn from personal experiences. That means personal experience in the sense, what knowledge are you acquiring? What skills are you acquiring? Right? So therefore, knowledge and learning cannot exist apart from a person. They are a part and parcel of that person itself. Right? And the next characteristic about learning is a multifaceted concept. Right? Now, while learning the subject at hand, the students may learn other things also. Right? They may develop attitudes about, you know, other things like good or bad based on their experience. Right? So, see, when you send a child to school, does the child only study maths, physics, chemistry and come back home? No. There are other things also that the student could study. How to talk, how to dress, how to, tease others, how to be a part of a group, all these things. So there are so many things that a person studies along with the actual thing. Next one is learning is an active process. That means see, the emphasis of learning lies on the student, not on the teacher. A teacher cannot assume that, okay, I will teach perfectly, whether the student pays attention or not, the student will still learn all these things. No, it is not like that, right? The next thing that we are going to discuss is what is the process of learning? What are the various steps in the learning process? Just a second. Okay. What are the various steps in the process of learning? First one is stimuli. I told you what stimuli is. Stimuli could be people, stimuli could be objects, stimuli could be events. So whichever object, person, or event draws our attention, catches our attention, that is known as stimuli. Right? So where do employees get stimuli from? They get stimuli from the actions of their superiors, from what their superiors tell them. Right? So these are all stimuli. The next one is attention. Right? So what? See, once you receive stimuli, then you have to pay attention to it. So the degree of attention depends on the nature of stimuli. All stimuli are not paid attention to. See, do you pay equal attention to everything that is being taught to you? No. You pay more attention to some, you do not pay more attention to some other aspects. Right? So technical and interesting stimuli are highly attended to. Similarly, stimuli which are career oriented, they also are greatly accepted by the employees. Right? So, how much of attention you pay to various stimuli depends on the stimuli itself. Right? The next one is recognition. So, attention paid stimuli, they are recognized as acceptable forms of improvement and new lifestyles. See, when employees are paying attention to stimuli, they are recognizing the stimuli for learning purposes. And this level of recognition, it depends on, what are the level values, what are the preferences, what are the needs and desires of the employees. Right? Translation. Coming to, the translation or the evaluation process. See, translation and evaluation is a crucial point for implementing the stimuli in the behavior through a concept known as reinforcement. Reinforcement means repetition. Repetition, right? So, employees, whenever you see attitude change, or mental and physical development in the employees, it is observed because of better performances. It is possible only through better performances. The next process is reinforcement. So what is reinforcement? See, reinforced perception is learning. The perception includes stimuli, attention, recognition, translation, and behavior. Now, this perception leads to learning, but one thing that you need to understand is perception itself is not learning unless and until it is reinforced. A perception, in order to become learning, has to be reinforced. So what is reinforcement? Repeated action is reinforcement. Okay? Any action that is repeated is reinforcement. So reinforcement may be positive, it may be negative. Right? The next one is behavior. So learning, see, with the first slide on learning, I told you, learning leads to change in behavior, right? So if there is no change in behavior, there is no learning. So learning changes behavior through reinforcement of perceived knowledge. It makes permanent changes in behavior. A temporary change in behavior cannot be called as learning. Then the next one is rewards. When do people learn? When do people change their behaviors? When they feel that they might be rewarded for it. When they feel that their changed behavior would be accepted. If people feel for some reason, If people feel for some reason that, their changed behavior would not be accepted, or their changed behavior would not be rewarded, then they would not even develop new habits, then they would not even learn, right? And these rewards need not necessarily mean monetary terms. It could be non-monetary also. See, take for example, I learn how to sing, and my friends will. If I feel that my friends will praise me for it, just praise, nothing else. That itself is a reward for me. Right? Next, coming to habits. Now, see, we said learning leads to change in behavior, and this change in behavior should be permanent, long lasting. So, a permanent change in behavior, it becomes a habit which helps continuous improvement in behavior and performance. So, those employees, who develop the habit of self appraisal and development, it is very essential, or it is very important for them, right? The next one is motives. See, motives in the learning process, they depend on the level of satisfaction. So those employees who are getting more satisfaction through learning, they develop high motives. And less satisfied learners have low motives, right? So learning is complete only when motives are fully realized and translated into others. Okay. Next one is efforts. See, uh, what habits have been acquired through that process of learning, these habits could help achieve good efforts and performance, and this has to be a continuous process. So what exactly are efforts? Efforts are the automatic outcome of good habits, which have been acquired through the learning process. So self-development is possible through self-effort. And employees who are willing to develop themselves are self-motivated and effort-oriented. Okay. The next topic is learning cycle. This learning cycle was proposed by David Cole, and it is also known as David Cole's learning cycle. Now, what does this learning cycle represent? This learning cycle represents a four-stage learning process in which the learner touches all the bases, right? So, what are these four stages in the learning cycle? Concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. Okay, so what do you mean by concrete experience? See, new experiences, new situations, which will help a learner learn something new, something tangible, something concrete. That is known as concrete experiences. Now, this might, whatever concrete experience, that might be a new experience, new situation, or it could also be a reinterpretation of the existing situation, right? So, all that falls under concrete experience. The next one is reflective observation of the new experience. See, whatever new experiences, whatever concrete experiences a learner comes across, the learner has to reflect on all those new and concrete experiences. And while doing that, they have to take into consideration their existing knowledge, their existing knowledge. And, there should not be any inconsistency between experience and understanding. So if there is any inconsistency between what a person has experienced and what a person is understanding, then the learning process would get affected adversely. Okay. The third one is abstract conceptualization. See, reflection gives rise to a new idea. It gives rise to it could also give rise to a modification of an existing concept. So, the ability of a learner to conceptualize abstract things, that is the third stage in the learning cycle. And the last one is active experimentation. That means the newly created or the newly modified concepts that have been understood, they must give rise to experimentation. That means the learner would apply his ideas to the situations around him and then see what happens. That is known as active experimentation. When do we say that learning is effective? Effective learning is seen when a person moves through all these four cycles, all these four stages of the cycle. That is, a person should have a concrete experience, then it should be followed by observation and reflection of that experience, which should in turn lead to formation of abstract concepts and generalizations, which are then used to test a hypothesis in future situations, resulting in new experiences. So all these things should happen for learning to be effective, right? So that is about David Cole's learning cycle. Right? So this model says that effective learning happens only when a learner can execute all four stages of the model. Right? The next one is types of learners. Right? Who are the different types of learners? So usually there are three types of learners: VAK, visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. So who are visual learners? Visual learners are those learners who primarily use their vision to learn. So they primarily use the written word. That means anything that is written, that will help them learn more, right? So such people, the visual learners, usually tend to be very diligent readers, who very carefully take down each and every word. Who are auditory learners? Auditory learners learn primarily through listening. See, I'm sure you all must have come across such students who don't study much, who don't seem to be spending a lot of time with their books and all. But if they listen attentively to in the class, they write their exams well, right? So they are examples of auditory learners. How is learning happening in them? It is primarily happening through listening. So these auditory learners, they focus their ears and attention on words, listening carefully to everything that is being told to them, right? So these people, they prefer to talk rather than to write, and they like discussing. The more they discuss, the more they absorb the concept. The last type of learners are kinesthetic learners. So kinesthetic learners are doers, right? So they learn by doing. Uh, so for them, practice is very, very important. They learn while practicing. So they always want to have, put their hands in everything in terms of physical action. Right? The next topic that we're going to discuss is called as the learning theories. Right? So there are four important learning theories. The first one is known as the classical conditioning theory. One second. Yeah, classical conditioning theory. So there was, the experiments done by Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov. These are taken as a very classic examples for this type of learning theory, the classical conditioning theory. I'll just very briefly explain to you what Ivan Pavlov did. We all know that whenever a dog sees food, its mouth starts watering. If it sees anything else, its mouth doesn't water. We have that is what we all know. But what Ivan Pavlov did is, every time before offering food to the dog, he rang a bell, right? So he used to ring a bell and then he used to offer food to the dog. Over a period of time, what happened? If he rang the bell without giving food to the dog also, the dog would start salivating. So what is happening here? There is a response. The response is salivating of the dog. But this response is a conditioned response. That means this the sound of the whistle should not cause dog's watering of the mouth, but it has done that. So that means conditioning has happened. This response is in this is a conditioned response for a conditioned stimulus, right? That is what the classical conditioning theory is all about. So in simple terms, what we can say is whenever classical conditioning involves, there is always a neutral stimulus before any naturally occurring reflex, right? The next learning theory is known as the operant conditioning theory. Operant conditioning theory. So what is operant conditioning theory? Operant conditioning theory is a theory which focuses on outcomes, right? Which focuses on outcomes. So take for example, we all know that when there is an iron box vertically kept, we are not supposed to go and touch it. Why? Because we know if we touch it, we'll we'll be burned. Our hands would get burned, right? That means we have learned once we must have put our hand there. It our fingers must have burnt. Based on that, we have learned that never again we should put our hand to a iron box that is kept vertically, right? So that is what is known as operant conditioning. And one important concept that you need to understand in operant conditioning is positive and negative reinforcement. See, if you want a person to repeat a behavior, a person is coming on time to office every day, reward him something. He will repeat that behavior, right? A person is coming to office on time every day. So provide him conveyance facility. He would make sure that he's never late. That is negative reinforcement, right? A person is not coming to office on time. Take for example. So start putting penalty to that person, right? So these are reinforcements and punishments that form the basis of operant conditioning. The next one is social learning theory. Social learning theory is people learn from social context. That is, people learn by observing the behaviors of others, right? Behaviors of people around them, right? And the last theory is known as the cognitive learning theory. Now, what is cognition? What does cognitive mean? Cognition means a person's ideas, thoughts, knowledge, interpretation, and understanding about himself and the environment, right? So, see, the learner forms a cognitive structure in memory, which stores organized information and thus, for all the events that occur. So, what this theory considers is this theory considers that, learning is an outcome of deliberate thinking. People think about a problem, people think about a situation based on all the facts that they have. And then they learn something, then they acquire new knowledge, new behavior. That is what cognitive learning theory is all about. Then coming to principles of learning, what are principles to learning? See, these principles to learning tell us when does learning happen best. First thing, readiness should be there. People should be willing to learn. That interest should be there in them to learn. Next one is exercise. Exercise, or in other words, we can say practice. When people practice something more, right? When people practice something more, only then they will be able to learn it, retain it, and also apply it. Similarly, effect, right? What is the effect? So, what is the emotional reaction? Whenever there is a pleasant or satisfying feeling after learning something, then that learning is strengthened, right? See, a child starts walking, everybody claps. So that's a pleasant feeling, satisfying feeling. The child would want to walk again and again. If that does not happen, then the child might not want to repeat that behavior. Primacy. Primacy means being first. See, whatever is taught first has the most impact on a person. So whatever you are teaching first, make sure that it is the right one. Because as students, people give most emphasis on what is taught to them first. Intensity, right? See, very dramatic, very, exciting learning experience. That brings more understanding, more, uh, appreciation of the facts rather than, just simply reading from something, right? And the last principle is recency, right? So whichever happened just in the recent past, they are remembered and learned better, right? So this is what we were supposed to discuss for today's class, right? Perception, attitudes, and learning. Okay. I hope you all understood what we discussed. I'll stop for now. Again, next Saturday we'll continue with the remaining unit. Thank you.